Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where this is a state of gaming. These I don't do as often, and they're kind of usually deeper dives into just kind of like a free thought process flow, and but something kind of dawned on me as well. Some of us would definitely agree that the games industry is crashing to a degree. Definitely AAA. So many games this decade have been a frustration. The whole push of live service since 2015 has just morphed into this just greedy, corporatized, inhuman feeling type of gaming experience. And yeah, it's been a frustrating thing. And while none of these things particularly like get the ball rolling necessarily, it's like all of them put together are kind of getting into this crash now because the incentivization is just slowly being ebbed away by the erosion of corporate greed everywhere that we look. And while from a business standpoint, I can agree with some of these points, I ultimately can't agree with the experience. And I know that I'm not alone in that. So ultimately, it's been happening for a long time. And this is kind of piggybacking off the news that we got with PlayStation ending physical media. Also, within the video, I brought up that, like Avowed, Xbox's game didn't have a physical release. Steam hasn't had physical releases for a very, very long time. But something kind of, I think some of the dynamic is kind of changing and shifting, or has been, and I didn't really see it until now. And so for me, it started with like day one patches and DLC. All of this was a good idea. They could actually fix and update the game, but then, well, the game always needed to be fixed at launch. It was always the worst experience, and the DLC turned into microtransactions and battle passes ultimately. It was no longer about the player experience, it was about how the player felt. And there is a difference there because the experience in the game is about the game and how the user is engaging with the game, not a store. And I think that's a huge point there. Also, buying digital games. Well, Steam started basically in 2004, and I remember that people hated it, said that Steam would fail, and players actually boycotted the service. But ultimately, people came over to Steam because, well, there were cheaper discounts they didn't have to pay for online, and there were other benefits too with PC that console does not have. For console, it is kind of around, it was the 2000s when we had digitization and digital games, but it was more around the 2010s during PlayStation 4 and Xbox One where we started building our digital libraries that we're not going to transfer. We're not necessarily guaranteed to be continued backwards compatible, maybe more just temporary. But multiple factors ultimately pushed discounts sooner and sooner into the games. And digital games was one of them because, well, we started having the issue where they were just taking our games away from us. It was no longer about the game as a product. It was more about, okay, we want you to play this now. And then when something else releases, we want you to buy it. Well, one of the ways to not do that, as the trend had been following even in 2010, was we're playing old games because we don't really like the new ones. So yeah, the 2010s, this shift already started. Not everyone wanted a battle royale, not everyone wanted live service games, and also not every single player game was actually worth buying, and some of the remasters were also bad too, like Until Dawn. But, there are caveats with each thing. Some things were good and some things were bad, and usually people take it in stride. But what we're having now is that, especially with the digital push, well, it was $60. Well, then it turned to 70. And then now they're continuing to try to push with the, DLC, the battle passes, and all of this other stuff. They're actually trying to push pretty much $80 to $100 being the standard. I remember Star Wars Outlaws being 110, where they had actually made a story that was a part of the game, and they decided, well, we'll take it out and we'll actually put it as DLC. So yeah, for $110 you could get the whole game. Also with GTA 6, well, thankfully it's not necessarily just missions. While I think maybe there are a couple type of missions that are behind the paywall, $100 is still $100 for feeling like you're getting all of the experience. And some people would say that is the whole game. And I would agree because the game isn't even out at launch yet. If it was stuff they were going to build in the future, well, yeah, I could see that as being actual DLC, and buying the game at launch is you're getting the whole game, and stuff is being promised later. We've also seen that for over a decade. But yeah, with PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, people were kind of getting and building into that ecosystem, but they weren't willing to necessarily spend $60 for every single game anymore. Instead, maybe now they would spend 30% off or 50% or even 75%, and they were willing to actually buy digital games, but generally not at the full price. You and I are probably both participants in that, whether it's Steam or any other platform. Games with DRM also came around. There was more control with these digital games. Things could be changed or shifted or altered, in the name of whatever. And yeah, DRM became more of a thing, and more players started to get more and more frustrated by that. I even think with Take-Two, after they bought Gearbox, well, they changed the EULA agreement for every single Borderlands game, including the older ones, which allow a lot of personal information to actually be given to Take-Two, which pretty much no company has ever asked for before on that kind of a level for that type of game. A looter shooter, one that you could play by yourself or with others. And it's really kind of insane the amount of stuff that they're asking. If you're curious, you can read their EULA agreement. It's all in there. There's also games that could be altered too, even with fixes. It would break new ones. There were changes too after you bought it, like I think Ready or Not, because again, women were represented in not a not so nice way, and it's like, well, that is reality with trafficking. That is definitely a real thing, but they're altering it in the game to kind of whitewash it with scrubby bubbles so that some people aren't offended, when in fact that is the real world. There's games too that I mentioned as well that also didn't come with physical releases. And then, yeah, between Steam, Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox, the future ultimately is more controlled. It's all about the company and what they can get away with, what they can get out of you. We do have good old games where there's a list of DRM-free games, which you literally get everything. You're able to launch everything, run everything, control everything, alter everything without needing the GOG launcher itself, except just to buy the game. You actually truly own it, which is really nice, and more people are pushing for that. But we're also only buying the license in DRM, whether it's ultimately physical or not. You're still having the license. The license is still on the physical cartridge or disc. Most of the game data isn't there for most of this type of stuff. And then the DRM checks, well, they're all still there too, and usually tightening, not getting less. There's also quite a few that we can't even keep. Any live service game can just basically be completely switched off. This is why we have Stop Killing Games, and why The Crew and Anthem and others, well, they just don't exist anymore. It's interesting, too, while it wasn't a good game, Concord, you could actually buy a physical release, and even though you have the disc, well, the game is totally dead. It's just a paperweight. You can't do anything with it. It's also interesting, too, that roughly 85% of games before 2010 you can't even buy or possess anymore. And even with companies that make disk drives and discs, well, they're kind of going bankrupt because they don't really see the profit or the demand. And I see this more as an issue with the consumer behavior. And I don't think they understand what they're giving up. Because again, when you can have an entire, movie and TV show library like Funimation or through Studio Canal, and PlayStation doesn't want to re-up the license because of reasons, well, you just lose everything. Thankfully, that hasn't happened on Xbox yet. I still have my movies and TV shows that I've bought in through Xbox. Even though the app doesn't exist anymore, I can still access the database, the stuff that I've bought. But this brings into the question, too, with physical games. I mean, do we actually own our games? No. Physical copy, the only reason those are still made, really, is just to kind of keep us satiated. Keep us content. Give us the illusion that we actually own our stuff. But now it's gone so far the other way that, well, hey, it's not even worth doing anymore. Even GTA 6, it was promised in February of this year and in May of this year by the CEO, Strauss Zelnick, that a physical release at launch would happen. Well, it's not. And it may not even happen at all. Again, we don't have exact confirmation. And Stu, even though these companies, these CEOs, they say stuff, well, I don't necessarily believe them. I take it with a grain of salt because they've changed their minds before. Or someone else above them, like with Phil Spencer and Satya Nadella, well, they don't always agree, but ultimately it's the top dog that makes the decision. So what I see ultimately with all of this kind of happening is ultimately there's more monopolization, there's higher paywalls. Even PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo, and they've all expressed that, yeah, they're just going to be charging more. They're trying to pass the $80 game. They're raising the prices on consoles. They're raising the prices on services. They're wanting you to spend more. They're wanting you to do more subscription services. And that's ultimately not better for the player. But yeah, they're removing the incentive to own, which means less money and ultimately smaller, lower quality games. Let me explain. When you no longer have the incentive to own, well, you don't care about it as much. You ultimately know you can play it for the experience today, but maybe not tomorrow. So, like myself, I'm not willing to pay $70 for a game that I may not be able to keep or own, even just for the next year, because maybe the servers get switched off or whatever. Now, there are free-to-play models, which is nice, but then again, all of the stuff that I'm still buying through microtransactions, which can be hundreds or even thousands of dollars over time, I'm not guaranteed to keep that. I'm not guaranteed to even transfer that into the next version of the game, like with Call of Duty or Madden or whatever. And so there's less incentive for me to own. And eventually, I don't even want to own, because every single time what happens is that I lose control. I lose ownership. I lose the ability to actually keep and maintain, and I lose liberty, the choice to do what I want to do. And so the companies make less money. There's also more competition, because when someone does a really, really good job, they actually make a ton of money. They have a lot of sales. Like Subnautica 2, like Crimson Desert, like Resident Evil Requiem, like Blueprints, or Balatro. They make a lot of sales because, again, they're making games for the player in most cases. Subnautica 2, I could argue on that. So with less money, you make smaller games, you make less games, you make lower quality games. Or you outsource to someone that is not as experienced or whatever. But two, this puts into risk the live service thing with keeping the game running and the devs working and making the new skins every month. And well, with millions a month, if the money isn't coming in, your studio can't be sustained. Your game basically crashes or fails or gets taken offline. And I expect this to happen with Marathon, ultimately, which is sad. But, this will probably happen eventually, too, with, like, Diablo and Elder Scrolls Online and some others that are really kind of like online service games. Also, too, with all of this kind of stuff happening in the industry, well, there's an increased service of adoption. Because, again, what's the point of owning? If you can't really own it, well, you don't want to pay a higher price. Actually, you want to pay the least amount possible or even free. And if you can just buy a service every month and play some games, and then maybe if you really like one, well, then you can actually just buy it while it's on sale, ultimately saving you money still. Eventually, I think, too, that if you're not going to own, well, the hard drive becomes a premium feature. Right now, the disk drive feels like a premium feature with the addition of the disk drive being added to PlayStation 5, and with the Pro not even having one. Until eventually, there isn't even a hard drive. Like, there isn't one at all. It's just all cloud computing. The Google Stadia already tried this, but again, was not successful. But I could see with Gen Alpha in the future, or with Gen Beta, that, like my daughter, well, they just live in a complete digital world where there is no hard drive. They're already expensive. And so why would companies push for you to actually own more of what you could control and for them to pay more cost to actually give you that control? They're not going to do that. There's no way in hell they're going to do that. Why would they? It's less control for them. It's less money for them. It's more expense. So then ultimately the apathy sets in. Just like music today. Gal, think about music. All of these groups, all of these bands, music really used to be something. It was this creative, not entity, but like this creative field that you could engage with. All sorts of instruments, all sorts of sounds and music, and you could put the soul in there. Well, games used to kind of feel like that until it's become corporatized. And now we look at music today, and it's the same 5 notes repeated over and over again. It's the same type of timbre with the voice, the same kind of vocals as they sing. It's the same type of uh, categories of songs. It's the same genres over and over again. It's the same things that they're talking about in every single song. Does anyone really care about music anymore? Not the new stuff. I don't think anybody gives a rip, honestly. I know I don't. I couldn't tell you who the latest anybody was in the last 5 years. 2020s? No idea. Well, Taylor Swift, I guess. Every once in a while, there's a rare one. But I mean, back in the 90s, even some of the 2000s, and of course, even before that, it was amazing to see the diversity and the character and the experience of music. Well, gaming used to feel that way. But it's not today. It feels more corporate, inhuman. They're just constantly, again, trying to have more control. Less control for you, more about how much money they can make instead of your actual experience. It's just kind of disgusting, really, when you think about it. And they're like, $70, please. No, no way. You're taking away my games. I'm losing my rights. I'm losing my ability to own. The games have these ideologies in there that I don't agree with. And two, just the focus of engagement. It's like, well, engage now until we make the new one, and then we'll can that one. We'll shut off the servers. We'll no longer support the game. We'll strip it from the store. We'll delist it. We'll allow the license to expire because we want you to buy the other one. This is the games industry, guys. This is just the few women that watch this channel. This is just what it looks like. And it's awful. And so this is where the apathy really sets in. People no longer care. People are just willing to spend the least amount possible. It's harder to make passion projects and for them too to also succeed. And the big AAAs, well, they basically lose a ton of money. My estimate just in the 2010s is that we've lost roughly around $15 billion. Or the 2020s, excuse me. Yeah, let me say that again. Roughly in the 2020s that, we've lost $15 billion. And just some of the big names that we know, not including everybody. It's an insane amount of money. And unfortunately, too, this is already happening. We're already spinning down the drain. And most of my friends, they're done. And it's kind of death by 1,000 cuts. And the average player today, they're 35. Well, what happens when the millennial generation, the biggest generation that we have, actually kind of quits gaming? Well, I think that's when the crash happens. That right there is the crash. It's really crazy. And then that's where the money disappears to. Also, too, I think people will ultimately move to Steam. That this really is just more reason to go on Steam if you're not going to have ownership anyway. At least they tell you that you're buying a license. Unless you can have a way to still back up your own copies and make them physical, if you wish, on Steam. It also ultimately means, too, that there's worse backwards compatibility. The less ownership and rights you have, well, the worse it actually is. Also, too, gaming becomes more like a mobile experience where it's just a store of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of games, and none of them really mean or matter or anything, and it's just kind of meh. Just the whole passion is sucked out of it, and I think that's the future that we're heading toward. I think consoles are in serious trouble, and I think, too, the ultimate push will still continue to be toward PC, and it'll be interesting to watch what Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox do trying to stay alive. Xbox is definitely trying to reach players with where they are, but with Nintendo and PlayStation, well, they say that ultimately they're trying to, again, go back to exclusives, trying to cut out more of the player base. In fact, cutting out the biggest parts of the player base in their circumstance. And I think ultimately Xbox will be okay, but yeah, it's definitely not going to come back. And PlayStation, I think they'll just follow the money. So when enough money isn't there, I think eventually, yeah, they'll just be like, hey, we'll put our games on Steam. And I think eventually Nintendo is going to do that too, because even we have games that are now going to mobile or that are being able to be played on PlayStation. or being able to be played somewhere else. And it's kind of interesting. Their IPs are no longer completely locked like they once they were. And so we get into this space where the hardware doesn't matter. It really just becomes about the focus going forward of just what do you want to play and what can you play it on. Even the hardware today is way too expensive. It's way too much money. But I think too, in least relation with this physical copies, is that PlayStation, they'll have to revise their return policy. So for PlayStation, I think they need to revise their return policy, because currently there actually is no option or recourse if you don't like the game. If you download it, well, you can't return it. There's nothing you can actually do with that. Well, at least with a physical copy, you can resell it back. You can sell it to somebody else. You can loan it to somebody else. I mean, even PlayStation made that joke with PlayStation 4, with Xbox One, with stuff being locked to the console. And they're like, hey, if you want to share a game, look at this. And just pass the game on. But yeah, in 2028, we're not going to have that. Physical games will no longer be made. So I think they need to do that. Also, there needs to be recourse for removing paid media. If you bought it, you should own it. This is something that I definitely did not go back to with Destiny 2. I quit a while back, was thinking of coming back, and then when I heard that they were basically removing paid DLC, I was like, nope, I am totally not doing that. That is utterly ridiculous. And yeah, it happens with movies and shows, and it's starting to happen with games too. This is why we have Stop Killing Games. Also, the length of live service games. I think we kind of need a guarantee of product, how long the game is expected to last, or we can have refunds or get some of that money back. And it also needs to be shown too that what you're buying is a license. Because let's be honest, the experience as a user, as a customer, well, it doesn't feel like you're a customer anymore. You're just a consumer. Consume product. Here's the next product. Consume again. Buy more. Spend more. And the longer you stay in a walled garden, the more realized you are, the more realized you feel like you're trapped, really. And eventually you start looking over the wall and you're like, hey, that looks greener over there. And maybe it's not much of a better experience, but if it is ultimately better to a degree, people will go there. And that's what's happening with PC. That's why some of the, people in their older teens and younger 20s are actually just going over to PC, and they're not looking back at console at all. I even have multiple friends myself where they're like, yep, I'm just PC now. I'm not going to buy any next gen console. I'm not going to buy the Switch 2. I don't care about exclusives. The benefits of being over on PC are so much better. No online, cheaper games. I get to own and back up my game from Steam if I want. I'm treated better and treated somewhat as a customer. Better return policy. There's multiple storefronts that are competing with each other. Even though Steam's on top, they still have to remain competitive with the other storefronts that are out there, which is ultimately better for you. But hey, everyone in the walled garden, which is roughly only 100 million people left, maybe 150, well, eventually they're going to quit too, or they're going to die, or they're going to whatever. And so, yeah, console dies. And that's kind of not necessarily the crash that I was expecting. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys and gals. It's just interesting to kind of think about this. But like, we've had a lot of things that have changed over just the course of the last 10 years, and it feels like it's accelerating. And so I think going forward with PlayStation 6, Xbox, or Switch 2, or PC, or whatever, gaming is feeling more like an investment because of how expensive it is. So treat it that way. Where are you treated best? And only you can decide what that is. So with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. If I earned it, like and sub, all that jazz. Also, I'm over at YouTube at Gaming Garbage 22, and you can also follow me too on Twitch for when I actually play games or when you catch the streams like this. Yeah, it's just interesting to watch in real time, and I don't think most people are really going to see it until it's too late. And maybe we're already there. Like I said earlier, we're kind of spinning down the drain, and there's not really a way out of that. Things are the way they are. We've lost a lot, but we don't have to lose anymore. So with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one. Sony probably will do fine for a while, but they've already lost over 11%. Booty call. What I mean by that is they've lost 11% of their revenue total as a company. The only thing that's still keeping them going is PlayStation. But movies, music, financials, and some of the sectors they've already left and are no longer a part of, they've already just completely disappeared. And so, yeah, the only thing left really for Sony, even their TVs, they're changing how they're doing their TVs. So, yeah, the last thing left is PlayStation. But, as the cuts keep coming to the player base, I think more and more people that are in PlayStation will quit and ultimately move to some form of console PC type of thing. And for younger generations, they don't care about PlayStation or Xbox or Nintendo. They're just going to PC to begin with. And that's really the biggest issue. I thank you for the comments, though. I'm enjoying that. I'm going to keep the flow going here.